And we are back. Thank you for staying with us right here on Good Morning Kenya. As I had mentioned earlier, we will be looking into femicide. Now, this is something that has been really rampant in the country. We've been talking about this since last year. And, you know, unfortunately, we've gotten into a new year and it's the same old story. By the way, according to reports, 27 days in and we've already lost at least 15 women to femicide. So it's not something to be overlooked. It's really something that should be seriously looked into. And for that reason, we are having this conversation today just to try and look at where we are going wrong, where is the problem, where the problem is rather, and mainly what is the cause? Because if we deal with the cause, then maybe it would be easier for us. So joining me for this conversation is Tracy Korugendo. Yes, she is a therapist and life coach. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Good Morning Kenya.
Thank you, Vivian. It's a pleasure to be here and to be talking about a topic so sensitive and so close to many. Yeah, and it's a pleasure for me to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure having you on board. Now, if we may just begin with the definition, just to get to understand, when we talk about femicide, it's a word that has been thrown around, you know, some may say. So what exactly is femicide?
So basically, I'll give a brief definition of what it is. It's the murdering of a woman, a man killing a woman on account of their gender. So that's basically what femicide is. So the target is to kill a woman, a man killing a woman because they are female. That's what briefly and basically femicide means.
Yeah, so being killed simply because of your gender?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the definition of femicide.
Yeah.
Are there
in
types?
Simple terms,
Are there types of
So
femicide?
we do have types of femicide. There is intimate partner femicide. This is a killing of a woman by their intimate partner, like a husband. And then we have non-intimate partner femicide, where the victim is killed by someone like a stranger or someone they don't have close ties. And then we have cultural femicide. This is where a woman is killed based on cultural beliefs or norms, even cults. There are certain cults where you're told to perform acts like maybe if you kill your wife, you might get rich. These are some of the things that we hear. So that's cultural femicide. Then we have family-related femicide, where the woman is killed by a family member because of, it can be things like family conflict or inheritance-related issues. So those are the few types of femicide that we have. And then the last one, systemic femicide, where it's a broader one, where it's just basically failure of systems to protect women and also gender discrimination. So those are the types of femicide that do exist.
Okay. And these cases have been very rampant, just as I mentioned on my intro. Like, it's unfortunate that just this year, you know, since January began, we've already lost 15 women to that. So maybe what factors contribute to femicide?
Yeah, before I even dig in, it's very unfortunate because it just doesn't seem to stop. There've been demos about it. And some of the causes, there are quite a number of causes, but we can pick out some that I believe are like major contributing factors.
Sure.
I can start with toxic masculinity. So when I talk about toxic masculinity, I mean these are norms and behaviors that dictate how a man behaves. And because society has bred men to believe that they cannot express their emotions. So what does that lead to? It leads to emotional suppression. So emotional suppression means men, when they are going through the difficult times, they cannot express themselves. The only emotion that we've allowed men to express that we all feel like is okay is violence or anger. When a man is angry, it's okay. But when a man cries or when a man expresses or when a man is vulnerable, it does not seem to be okay. It looks like a weak thing for a man to do. So where does that leave them? And we all know what happens when emotions are pent up and pent up, that can lead to violence. And then when I also talk about toxic masculinity, we have a devaluation of femininity. So looking at traits that women have, such as empathy or nurturing, as a weakness. And then that makes some men take, not all men, so I'll use some men, take advantage of that, because you're looked at like you're a person who is weak. And then also part of toxic masculinity is telling men to be dominant and aggressive. So in this effort to look like they're being dominant, they end up being aggressive to insert or to prove a point. So that's just toxic masculinity. Another cause of this femicide is domestic violence. I talked about intimate partner type of femicide, and I think
and it's actually
the main one.
Yeah,
according to research, 44% of the cases are intimate partner femicides. So they are committed by husbands, and then 22 by boyfriends. So those are people that are having relationships. So we cannot, I think I should have started with domestic violence, because when there is domestic violence, what happens? The victim is isolated, so they will not seek help. So they will not speak out. So what will it lead to? This victim is easily violated and killed. And then also part of domestic violence, how it escalates into, it's those accumulate the fighting and the violence, it escalates and escalates. So it will lead to death. And then still under domestic violence is just silencing the victim so that they are unable to speak up and they have no platform. I talked about isolation. So that's how domestic violence will end up leading into murdering the victim. And then we have economic dependency. There's a lot of, according to research, most of the victims are actually 18 to 36 years of age. Those are young adults. So we have girls, young girls, depending on, let me use the word wababas, or older men, depending on them financially. So what happens in this case? If you cannot dance to the tunes of this baba, it can lead to violence. We read these things, we hear about these things, how he's married, but you're in a relationship with him, but you're not allowed to have any kind of controlling. So when you decide to do things against the sponsor, another word that we use, then it can lead to that.
Violence,
then we have culture-related issues. I talked about the culture and the cult beliefs and norms and practices, that those also can lead to femicide. So, and then lastly, we cannot forget mental health. So these people that are committing these acts, we want to believe, I don't think they are 100% mentally stable. So, but it's important to note that not all mental health cases or people with mental health issues are violent. We have to note that. There are certain mental health disorders that will spike femicide or aggression. For example, substance abuse. If someone is under the influence of substances and they're in a conflict, definitely their judgment is altered, or the chances of doing impulsive reactions in the middle of a conflict are very high, and that can lead to violence. Another mental health issues is borderline personality disorders. When I talk about those, I just have to break it down, these mental health terms. These are characterized by a fluctuation in moods and behaviors. So like depression. When you're depressed, your moods and your behaviors are fluctuating. You're constantly sad and you lack the ability to engage in activities. So being in such a mental state, it triggers or will lead someone to commit violence and also end up maybe committing murder, even suicidality, where people kill themselves. We've seen people kill their children, kill their wives, and also kill themselves. So those are the cases that we're talking about that will contribute to this femicide. And lastly, also psychotic, people who are unable to make sense of what reality looks like. That is what we call psychotism. So mental health is a big factor. I'd also talked about men not expressing their emotions. It also goes back to their mental well-being. So those are some of the causes that I can point out.
Some of the main causes.
Yeah, the main causes.
I want us to talk a bit about victim shaming and what that does to this entire thing called femicide, and also just gender-based violence in broad.
So victim shaming, it's very unfortunate because what it does is create fear and intimidation for the victims to come out. So if I come out and I'm talking about it, and maybe the intention is to create awareness so that more and more people can come out, or if you're in a situation where it might lead to that, you can be able to come out. So if I am shamed, then what happens to the other victims?
They're going to be quiet about
Intimidated, scared, and they'll keep quiet and they will not have a safe platform to come out. So basically that's what victim shaming does to the other victims. How do we get the men on board? I know that there are men who are, you know, have joined in on this fight against femicide, but how do we just ensure that every one of them is on board on this and it doesn't end up being, I keep saying this, it's like a gender fight whereby you have some men, if you go check on social media on a story on femicide, you'll find some men who are arguing it's not just the women who are being killed, men are also being, you know, violated in relationships and this and that. Just how do we stop this coming out as a fight between, which gender is being abused more, you know? I think speaking about this, we have to highlight that it doesn't take away from the fact that men are also being killed. We call that androcide. So
it's called androcide.
Yeah, for killing of men. It's just maybe the difference could be in the numbers, but it doesn't take away from the fact that men are being killed as well. And at the end of the day, we just have to be humane and just bring a stop to killing each other. But it's so encouraging to see some men get involved, because at the end of the day it boils down to being a brother's keeper, or calling wrong, seeing where wrong is wrong and bringing shedding more light on it. So to get men involved, it still boils down to creating awareness, mental health of men. How do men express themselves when they are going through the most? Because we've now identified the biggest type of femicide we're having here is intimate partner femicide. So how are they dealing with the challenges that come with marriage? Or what is it that they are struggling with that makes them unable to regulate their emotions or manage this anger that leads to the violence? So men, by just being brothers keepers, or even in prison, the prisoners that are in prison that have committed these murderers, do we create time to get to know what happened, what led to this, what was the cause? So just understanding where this is coming from, because we are trying to fight this, but if we ignore the root cause, then we are just like putting a Band-Aid on a wound.
Very true.
So,
you know, from the causes that you've outlined for us, all the causes that may, or factors that may be contributing to femicide cases, probably what are the possible solutions to some of these causes, so that we get to the, you know, to uproot it before we even get to, you know, start dealing with the actual issue now?
So I believe we have to address mental health, not just because I'm a psychologist, but mental health is a big thing. Because when we talked about the causes, domestic violence still boils down to mental health. And also the toxic masculinity, still address it through mental health. So for as long as we don't get to the root cause, I'm afraid that we are just, like I said, putting a Band-Aid on a wound. So I believe we need to address men's mental health by creating programs where they have safe spaces where they can go and deal with these emotions. I believe in strengthening the law enforcement, where there are strict penalties for the people, the perpetrators of these murders, even for domestic violence. Like, it's very strict in that there are impactful consequences for the people that commit these victims. Then creating awareness, starting with the domestic violence, just creating more awareness so that the women in these relationships, that are being abused, they need to know that it could end up leading to femicide. And then economic empowerment of these young ladies that have to depend on our babas for money. Yeah, so there needs to be economic empowerment so that that dependency that will lead to all these gruesome actions can be managed. And then community involvement. Yeah, by involving the community, educating them so that when they see those, because what we have is what has been reported. You can imagine what has not been reported. So involving the community so that when the cases, they report them to shed more light. And then also we can implement more support services that are easily accessible for the victims, like hotlines, safe homes for them to go to so that they do not have to remain isolated. Yeah.
There are some stereotypes that we got to mention. For example, when you talked about, you know, how men have been brought up in this society, how most men have been brought up in this society, whereby as a man you're not supposed to show your emotions, you know, you're not supposed to cry, you're not supposed to, you know, you're deemed weak if you actually, you know, show that part of your emotions. So, you know, and that is one of the reasons actually that you've pointed out as one of the reasons why we may be having such cases, because someone, you know, just piles up their emotions and then when it bursts out, it's you know, tragic. So probably just what are some stereotypes, you know, gender stereotypes to be specific, that should be done away with, both the gender stereotypes on females and males as well?
Okay, I think gender stereotypes also enhance what we are dealing with.
Exactly.
Like for women to be looked at as the weak gender, because of naturally their traits or how they handle conflict or how they are wired. I think that's that stereotyping only makes men feel like they can easily go ahead and commit these murders and probably think they can get away with them. So stereotyping women to be weak, especially when it comes to physical violence, definitely a man is most times, we are not saying women do not attack men. We have cases where women have also attacked men, but just looking at a woman as a weak gender is something that we need to address, because I believe that's one of the biggest factors as well. Because there's a reason as why the numbers for women is more than the men. Now,
we know that the president is now, this has come to his attention, you know, and last year around November, if I'm not wrong, he spoke about it, and he actually set aside money to just help with femicide cases and gender-based violence as well. He set aside 100 million. But what do you feel this is the way to go? Like, just, you know, when he gave out that amount that should go about helping in maybe sensitization and whatnot, is that the way to go? Or just from your point of view, what should be done, you know, as a country, for us to be able to deal with this? What exactly should be done? Who should come on board? I mean, the president is, you know, like the highest office of this land. He's gotten his attention on this, but it's still ongoing. So what is amiss?
So the fact that this money has been given, but we still have the problem ongoing, and 15 cases already into the year. We just, January has not even ended, goes to show that whatever is in place is not working. It's clearly not working.
Exactly.
So, so the funds allocated, I don't think that can also address the issue, because there is so much that needs to be done to address this issue. Like maybe declaring it a national disaster, where there is more attention being given to it. There is a special police unit that that is assigned to victims, like doing more than what we're already doing, because clearly what currently we're doing is not working. So I don't believe there is any amount of money that is given that can fix it unless we do much more. So I've talked about men's mental health. those are things that need to be addressed. Hotlines and being able to create platforms where they can seek help. When the people who commit these crimes are arrested, do we even do a psychiatric evaluation to know the state of their mind? Do we?
I don't.
So we are just taking them to prison, not addressing what are the root causes, like I said, what is really causing this. So we need to go back to the ground, know what is causing this. The victims are not here to speak for themselves, but the perpetrators are here. Can we get information? Can we try and gather information and know why this has been committed? And then that way we can start from the root cause. Yeah.
Yeah. What role should the legal system play in all of this?
Okay. I believe most of the victims' families do not have the financial capacity to seek justice. So the legal system can come in by intervening and maybe offering support to these families so that they seek their justice, because a lot of the cases have not been concluded or finalized. So the legal system can come in by offering support to these families, or even I believe the perpetrators do have a legal team. So in this process, even as they defend the perpetrators, maybe just sit and understand their client so that we have information on, again, the root causes of these things. Yeah.
Yeah. Are there, you know, as we've put it, and as research shows, you know, the intimate femicide is on the rise. It's the main one. So maybe are there warning signs that one can look out for, you know, before we get to a point where, yes, we've lost someone now?
Yeah. So the intimate goes back to one of the causes being domestic violence. So already being in an abusive relationship, physically abusive relationship, maybe it starts, because most abusive relationships start with emotional abuse. We have financial abuse, different types of abuse. So domestic violence is different from femicide, because here the intimate partner is trying to use power and force to gain control over their partner. So just being in an environment or in a relationship where there is already abuse, any form of abuse, financial, emotional, it doesn't have to get to physical. Those are the telltale signs for intimate partners. Yeah, and one of the leading causes of relationship issues is finances. Yeah, so those are the telltale signs in relationships that someone needs to look out for. Any form of abuse. Yeah, any form of abuse.
Yeah. How does femicide impact the wider society?
You can imagine there's a lady whose body parts were torn the other day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just watching that, anyone would be cringed with that. So society is impacted by this because it causes fear and anxiety. I guess women feel like they are not safe, they are not protected. Men as well, the ones that have been attacked. So I believe that seeing all this happening is not sitting so well with a lot of people, not just women, even men, because the men do have brothers and sisters and wives. So the impact on society is it's very big, and causes a lot of traumatic experiences, causes a lot of anxiety. There are people now the families of the survivors, they have to constantly see victim after victim after victim, and you can imagine what that does. They're relieving. Every time there's a victim, they're relieving, and those that don't even have justice. So not just society, family, and everyone is impacted by this.
What can be done in terms of just raising awareness? You know, just raising awareness on this.
We're already raising awareness, I believe, by doing this.
Yeah, of course.
And the social media platforms, programs, TV shows like this one. And I think when it comes to the community, just having those, I remember back in the villages, just like how campaigns are done, just having talks where you bring people together, women educate them, start with the basic domestic violence, because that's where it's going to start from. Educate them about this, the signs, that telltale signs of what abuse looks like. That's where we have to start from. And then we can talk about where it will lead to. So we cannot go and educate them about femicide because it's the effect of a cause. So we start with a cause and the telltale signs, like you asked about what someone can look out for. So we start with basic education of what, and then for the men as well, we start with basic education of mental health and create platforms where we encourage them to speak up and not look at it. And we stop these norms of statements like, be strong. What does it mean to a man in the village? What does it mean to an educated man? What does it mean to an uneducated man when we say that word, be a man? Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe on, you know, to survivors or even families of some of these victims who've been killed, you know, some of them are very horrific, as you've mentioned, you know, going to collect body parts of a family member, you know. Just what's the best way to deal with them?
So in an effort to stop femicide, I think we also need to pay attention to the families of the victims and offer them help in healing and finding a safe space where they can express what they are going through. Because we are so focused on, which is what we should focus on anyway, stopping the femicide, and we've forgotten the families and what they are dealing with. And you can imagine for those that are still trying to seek justice and the pain they carry each and every day without addressing it or having a safe space. So we need to offer them support, like therapy, on how to cope. They probably, you can't heal from such an experience, but you can find ways to live and cope with what has happened.
Yeah. Well, when you talk about mental health, you know, mental health or mental wellness is quite broad.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about mental health as a way of us, you know, stopping such, you know, from happening, where exactly do we start from?
Okay. Well, in this case, we start from the perpetrators to educate them, because this is just emotional
Now this is
regulation.
after, because these are people who've already committed this acts, right?
Yes. So, okay, for both, I believe for both. So for the victims, we need to educate them, like I'd said, on what abuse looks like. Yeah, so that they remove themselves. We're assuming the biggest percentage that we have is intimate partner, so that they have the capacity and the knowledge to remove themselves from situations that will lead. But then, like I said, we have the perpetrators that are committing the act. We need to educate them on emotional regulation, because these are acts of violence. Where does violence start from? Failure to regulate your emotions, like anger. So, like educating, or this can be, I have always been a believer in having psychology in schools, having mental health educational platforms in schools, because it starts with how we are raising our children. These children that when I have a son, as I'm raising my son, I grow up hearing my father or my parents tell my brothers to be men. They cannot be vulnerable. So how I'm raising my son now to become a man, how am I teaching him to regulate his emotions? That's where we need to start. So just, I believe in schools, as we educate children about all these other things, we need to have mental health embedded in schools, or even psychology as a topic in schools. These are things that will teach people more about themselves. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you seeing a time where we won't be talking about these cases? Because it seems like it's a never-ending thing. You know, are you seeing a time when we will not be talking about this because we don't need to talk about it because it's no longer there?
Personally, not anytime soon. Because like we said, Vivian, we are talking about cases that have been reported only. And we have those that have not been reported. Yeah. So you can imagine it's still out there.
Yeah. So you're not seeing it in the near future. That's so unfortunate.
Oh God, we are hoping that the numbers can reduce, but what we are talking about, for as long as we do not address it in the right way from the root cause, then it will continue happening. Tell me, what do you think?
I mean, it's the reality, and it's quite unfortunate that, you know, we are not seeing an end game to it, you know, and like you said, like it just needs for us as a country to actually see it as a national disaster and maybe put all our efforts into it. Then maybe we can say that we've been able to reduce these numbers or completely do away with it, you know. But I don't know. I'm not seeing it also, which is very unfortunate.
Yeah, sorry. What makes it complicated is we don't have one particular solution. It needs like multiple interventions from different angles for us to be able to address it. So the government can provide the money, but the mental well-being of the men, who's going to take care of that? As we raise our children, who's going to teach them emotional regulation? The law, the justice, each one needs to contribute towards finding a solution. It's not a one solution based issue.
So who should come on board? Everyone.
Everyone, literally. Because like I said, we are raising men. What are we telling them? How are we telling them to express their emotions? We talked about the toxic masculinity. Who needs to address that? That is a conditioning that starts from childhood as we raise the men. Then we are talking about the law enforcement. Who needs to do that? So everyone needs to chip in. The community awareness, educating the women about abuse and what it looks like. So it's not a one-man show. And
I also think another way maybe that can help in this, you know, probably, you know, just holding the perpetrators accountable. Because most of them are still scot-free, you know, so even if, say, someone who knows, you know, that maybe there's a man who knows that that particular person committed that act and he's here, you know, nothing has, you know, he hasn't been held accountable for what, you know, he did. So what would stop this other one from doing it? You know, they won't be scared of, okay, maybe I will lose a big chunk of my life, you know, in prison or whatnot. So I think if we really find ways of holding the perpetrators accountable, I think there should be something new that is introduced that is, I don't know, that's just me thinking top of mind, something, a way, you know, a way of punishing, you know, the perpetrators that is so lethal, that would make the other not want to be, you know, vile huwa tunasema iwe funzo. Something like that. No?
I agree with you. I think I talked about enforcing law, like stricter penalties for the victims.
Exactly.
Like countries like in America, domestic violence is, if you are reported for domestic violence, you lose everything. So starting with what penalties do you have in place for basic things, not basic, for just some of the causes like domestic violence. People are abusive to their partners and they walk free. So what penalties do we have before we even get to, because if we enforce laws, when the crime has already committed, someone is already dead. But for these, the telltale signs, the causes like DV, what penalties do we have in place for that?
That would at least curb that, you know, so that we don't get to a point
where so we don't have to wait to get till someone is killed. So that's the DV for both men and women.
Do we have mental health support services, enough mental health support services in this country?
I don't believe they're enough, personally. And before we even go to the support service, let's talk about the stigma that is associated with mental health. There's quite a lot of stigma, especially for men. Like I said, they are conditioned to believe that expressing your emotions is a weak thing to do. So I think the biggest issue here is the stigma. So even the support services being present, hotlines and all this, are they willing to seek the support? So right now we don't have enough, because also the mental health experts are doing it commercially. I don't know if the government has mental health, any mental health support for the person who cannot afford to pay for the private
I think there
service.
are some that are there, set aside by the government. I believe there's one at Kenyatta Hospital where one can receive free therapy.
Yeah, I'm not very sure about that. I'm not very sure about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're talking about, yes, it's there. Someone can go and seek help. How many people are willing to walk in there and get the help that they need, especially men?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So also maybe if we can, reduce the cost of it too.
Yeah.
As much as we're saying, maybe how many are willing to go and, talk about maybe whatever is troubling them to our therapist and whatnot. Also just getting to reduce that cost, because one facility cannot cater to everyone, to all the people that may need that service. So maybe just working on also cutting on that cost.
Yeah, and also working on, I don't know how we will reduce on the stigma that is associated with mental health. Yeah, I don't know how we'll do that. And once that is done, I believe we can start addressing some of these emotional related issues and regulation. Yeah.
All right, okay. Well, it's quite a sensitive topic, and it's a topic that we can talk about on and on and on. But I really hope that it gets to a point where we are able to cut this, We are able to have men that are empathetic, We are also able to have women that are empathetic. Because when you talk about femicide, yes, it's, women being killed, but it starts from the GBV, as we see, gender-based violence. That's where it all starts. And in that also, the men are also suffering, when it comes to that. So if we can just be able to raise a society that is empathetic, because I believe if you're empathetic, you wouldn't do anything that would hurt the other person. So maybe it boils back to how we bring up our children. If we start from there, then maybe in future we will not have to deal with these cases, because I think that's the best way to go about it as of now, because it's beyond some of us, It's beyond some of us. So if we just deal with it from the very
root.
Yeah, the very root of it, from the family, from just you raising your son and your daughter, raising them in a way that there's equity, and you're not looking at it like, the baby girl can cry, but then when the baby boy cries, you're like, why are you crying like a girl? Just starting from there and raising them in that way. I think that's the best way to go about it. Maybe this is to solve it in future. As of now, we just ask everyone to be empathetic about the other person. Just maybe your parting shot on this.
Yeah, my parting shot is us talking about this femicide doesn't take away from the fact that men are also being killed.
Absolutely.
So at the end of the day, what we need to address is this violence. And also in an effort to try and stop this, let's not forget the families of the victims, because you can imagine the trauma and the pain that they are going through. So in the effort to find solutions to stop this, we should reach out and offer support to these families and help them find healing. Yeah, those are my parting words. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tracy, for joining us. And it's always a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Okay, that was Tracy. She is a therapist and a life coach, and she was here just to help us try to look at the root cause of femicide and try to find solutions to it. And this conversation is what winds up Good Morning Kenya for today. My name is Vivian Dego, and just to leave you with maybe a small quote. In a world where you can be anything, please just choose to be kind. See you tomorrow, same time. God willing, do enjoy the rest of your viewing. Goodbye.